Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside Battlefield. My name is Tom, community manager for Battlefield, and today we're doing a little bit of a different episode. You've requested a look behind the scenes for our teams that make Battlefield. So today we'll focus on how we're updating and tweaking the Battlefield live service environment. And with me are Erik, Kevin, and Sean. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good as always.
Fantastic to be here.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, something a little different.
Yeah.
It's fun.
So, look behind the scenes of what our teams do for Battlefield. So, first, can you start with introducing yourselves to our audience and what you do at DICE?
Yeah, my name's Kevin Moore. I'm the project technical director for Battlefield 2042. So I guess in this context, a lot of what I do is I'm kind of the person who makes stuff get into production. A lot of stuff comes through me when we're releasing builds, when we're making patches, releasing new seasons. So I'm kind of the gatekeeper in a way for a lot of the stuff that we want to ship.
Okay.
I'm Erik, release manager here at DICE since the past 10 years. My work as a release manager is essentially kind of similar to Kevin, the gatekeeper of the live or production environment where all the players play. I like to see myself as the guy protecting the player experience and ensuring that we're all aligned in our plans whenever we release whatever we do in production.
Yep. I am Sean Merson. I'm a producer in DICE for the live service team of Battlefield 2042. I primarily work on our game operations, so I too am also a gatekeeper.
There's a common theme here. We're gatekeepers.
I primarily focus on the configuration of our live service tooling in the back end.
Awesome. Little trivia before we dive into today's topic. So Sean and I used to work for EA together in Galway. And in 2017, we went to Gamescom, where we in the Battlefront 2 booth. And that's where we met Erik as well.
Yep.
I think that's the first time where we met each other. So that's like 6 years ago when we were in the Battlefront 2 booth together at Gamescom.
I think I met Kevin there
Is that that's the year that we had the air I can't remember what it was called, but the with they had like the X-wing that was over the hall because we were doing I can't remember, Starfighter Assault, is that what it was called?
Yeah, so one type of Starfighter.
So you were there as well.
Yeah, but I was there for Battlefield Incursions. I was in the
you were in the back room.
So we were all there.
We were all there, but like I
cool,
didn't know you then. I first got to know Erik then.
Yeah.
And Sean and I worked together and
Showcasing Battlefront 2. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I mean, Gamescom is always amazing, right?
But I was the only one there for Battlefield, I guess.
Yeah. But here we are now, like 6 years later, so all working on Battlefield. So that's interesting times.
Small world.
Small world. A little trivia for whoever's listening. So hope you enjoy that. On to today's subject. So patching or updating games is something you as a player experience often, but it's not clear what work is involved in the background. So over time, we have received many questions from you as a player about why we handle it the way we do or how the patching process works and which different teams are involved. So as a start, and I think I'm going to start with Kevin and Erik, can you give us an overview of what goes into releasing a patch and just a brief overview to start?
A lot of meetings. I mean, it's a lot of alignment. Like we can't release a patch on our own. There's a lot of different teams across EA, within DICE, external teams that we have to be working with. We don't. I mean, we release on consoles. That means that there's a lot of stuff that has to go into this. So we have to be pretty focused on. We do our work internally. We get our build. We get to that point, then we work with our partners like release management, with POM, and we're able to kind of bring in all of these teams that we have across the company to make sure that we have alignment in what we're doing.
Yeah. I second that a lot. Like communication is key and aligning everyone, because it's not as simple as just producing a build and just putting it out there. That would be crazy, to say the least. I come in after Kevin has essentially produced the build or made the patch that we're shipping and at that stage align it with everyone within EA. All of these teams that Kevin mentioned, there's a lot of different people involved in making sure that we can actually deliver something to the players. Many steps, and it's very, very important to be very detailed in all of these steps, because if you miss something tiny, it could have disastrous effects for the players eventually. So it's something we've done a lot, obviously, and we become better and better at it. But it's a yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
looking back over the last, I guess 18 months with this game, there have been a lot of small mistakes that happened, that the things that players don't see. We're able to catch them ahead of time, but there's been a couple of them where it's like, what happened? we're scrambling a little bit internally, but we get it resolved, but before it impacts players. But it's having those checks and balances as you go along in that process is super important.
And I think you mentioned, like eventually we get a patch into the players' hands, but there's a lot of time involved in just even reviewing what goes into the update. And I think we didn't go into too much detail there. But before we do, like Sean, I think you are like then at the end stage to make sure you verify which fixes are in an update, and then you work with teams, including me, to make sure, like, okay, communications are ready, etc. So can you speak more about how you work?
Yeah,
on that
absolutely.
as well?
So whereas Kevin will, like, more importantly, be working on the actual client deliverable, myself and the game operations team will be more focusing on more of the timeline of the events, the run of show, what we are introducing in the patch, how that all needs to be configured, so when it does land in the player's hands, everything runs as it should do.
Yep.
All of our live service backend tooling, we have like amazing configurability, which we'll no doubt discuss a bit later on in the podcast. But I think people don't necessarily realize just how many things go into the release day itself, right? Especially for a new season. We could have like up to 50 major topic points within a day. Like this hour, season 4, for example, ends. This hour, season 5 begins. And, in between that, we'll need to do a lot of checks and balances. We'll have our live QV team, so our quality verification team, going in and making sure that the player experience is what it should be when things do go live. We might have DLC going live. There is a lot going on there. And it takes, as Kevin said, a lot of meetings, a lot of organization, a lot of communication, so that everyone is aligned on what we are doing, and when that actually does go out, that it's as we expect it to be.
Yeah. That's actually why. So when if you look at season 5 release, that is why when you download that patch, there's that 4 hours that we have right now between when you actually get that patch and the season starts. That is when our live QV team, they're doing all that verification. We have this system called time traveling, where they can basically play the game as it is going to be later that day, or later that week, month, year. So they can see that new experience, and they're going through the battle pass, they're checking things, making sure that everything works as it should in production. We always find a couple things. We go and fix them up, but we're able to do that before players actually get their hands on them.
I think an interesting item here to touch on is that eventually, as the player, you boot the game, you update the game, update the game. When you receive a new patch and you just see the thing, this is the game, but there's thousands of dependencies in the background, like all connected, working at the same time to just keep that running. And I think that's probably something you won't see as a player, but that's something our teams are constantly checking and making sure everything is connected and working well. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, a lot of that stuff, it happens ahead of time. Like we have all of our backend systems that, so on Tuesday, we release a season. The entire backend has been updated the week before or 2 weeks before. Everything's already there waiting for players in a more of a backwards compatible sort of state. at that point, it really is just downloading the update. You get the new patch, you boot it up. It's already everything's already configured for you to hop in and play. The same thing with our live configuration stuff. That one is a little more has to happen at a certain time because we don't want to have all the new stuff there for an old game because it might not fully understand how to parse all of that information.
Yep.
Yeah, if we look at like the specialist the rework, for example, bringing the classes back, that was a very big example of how we have to be a bit more on the nose when we do these things versus like trying to plan in advance and pushing stuff into production early because you're doing such an overwhelming change to the game that, different types of planning for different types of events that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, that was fundamentally like a rework of a lot of the systems. So you have it's very binary. It's like either the game is running one state or another, and there is no easy way to cut over between the two. So,
I mean, that's part of the planning when you have such a big change like the class change. I mean, we need to plan not only what the changes are, but how are we going to deliver that to the players in the best possible way. So what steps do we take and in what order? And that essentially goes back to the meetings that we have. And, we need to not only plan how we're going to deliver it, but test how that is delivered and ensure that the experience is correct. Because we want to ensure everything's checked before players see it for the first time, just to ensure that quality experience for the players.
So how do we plan for and develop an update itself? So we have an overview now about the different things we do in the background, but how do we plan for and develop a patch? For example, we need to deliver season 5, which is now live for players. Like, how do we start doing that?
I mean, it begins with knowing what we want to deliver, right? So we have a high level feature brief for every feature essentially we're going to add into the game. And then you basically go down a tree structure from there on in. So we can pick a specific part of the patch, say the battle pass, right? So for the battle pass, we know that we're going to be delivering, an X amount of weeks of weekly missions. The battle pass itself, which is usually 100 tiers, which includes a free pass and a premium pass. So you just you break down that individual structure from a high level feature and you keep going down until you've discovered every element that you want to deliver. And from there on in, the individual teams within the Battlefield team will be responsible for creating and delivering their own segments. And then we get to a point in that delivery where I guess I would come in, for example, and when Kevin would have a bit more focus when we get to more the finaling stage, where we then go and validate and sanity check everything that's gone in to ensure that is the actual experience that we wanted to deliver. But again, I think this is going to be the podcast where we say that we're in meetings a lot.
But that sounds very broad, but how we pick every single change that goes into an update, we review that very carefully with multiple teams across multiple meetings. We don't just dump a bunch of changes into an update. That's not.
I mean, to a point, it kind of is, but kind of isn't. I mean, maybe jump in a little to the technical details of stuff, but we have our development stream, our place that we develop. So say that is now the 5.0 release, so season 5. That'll be on our development line for a couple of months. And people are, going back to what Sean said, we've broken down all the work into all these different tasks and tickets, and people will go, they'll pull those tickets and they'll start making those changes in the development line. At that point, it's a little less scrutiny about what's going in because there is so much time to do more development and to iterate on features and to do testing. But there becomes a time, it's usually about 7 weeks, I think, before the patch goes live, where that switch kind of turns. It's called branching. We take it from our development line, we put it somewhere else in staging. And our team, they focus a lot more on bug fixing at that point. They're saying, okay, well, we know all of the content that's going in this patch. We've decided, we know the map. The map is pretty good state at this point. We know all the different features. Now let's go and fix all the remaining bugs that are there. go through that for a couple more weeks, and then you do another branch into your release and verification stream. You work with your QV partners again to go through. So okay, let's make sure we've found the last couple bugs, fixed any critical issues, any crashes, anything like that, and then you start to go through sending it off to your partners to get into production.
That's where I come in.
Yeah, but that is it's a bit of a long process. I mean,
but on purpose.
Absolutely. If it's 4 weeks before a patch is going live, and someone on the team comes and says, "Hey, I've got this idea for this great new feature that I'd like to get into 5.0 that's going live in 4 weeks," it's like, sorry guys, like we gotta find a different patch for this,
because like if you do edit, it might like.
I mean,
the build is already branched, so it
is. I mean, technically, you can go at it. Like, there's nothing that's preventing us from doing it, except our own guidelines. We're saying that if we want to be protecting the player experience, we don't want to start adding features in that late, because if that feature, well, one, it might not be done by the time that we need to ship it, and then now you have a half-done feature that we're going to have to either take out or hide or disable. There could be other dependencies. Like, we could go and add a new feature in late. QV, they'll test it. We'll do all this work, and then you might find out the day that the patch is going live that there's actually this issue that you didn't foresee. That if you had the proper amount of time to test it, you would have found. So it really goes back to protecting the player experience. We've been really cautious on this project about when we can add new features. We're trying to do it all the time, but we're just trying to be as safe as we can about it. So in this hypothetical case where someone comes a couple weeks after we branch into our staging line with a new feature, we'd just say, hey, let's put it in the next patch.
Put it in the next one.
It's not that we don't want to give that to players. We do. We just want to do it in the safest way that we can.
And I think common feedback we get from players is, do you test your updates? Do you test your game when you release something? Because it happens that when a new update releases, there is a bug.
Of course.
But can you talk more about, because you all of you have already mentioned it, that through all of these iterations we make on the updates, there's testing. But can you speak more to how that works, and also why sometimes it happens that there's still bugs that make it into the live environment for players?
I mean, there's thousands and thousands of hours of testing that we do.
Okay.
But I mean, say that's 10,000, just to throw out a random number.
A random number.
Because I actually, off the top of my head, I don't know what the number would be anyways. But then we release the patch. Players are going to accumulate 10,000 hours of gameplay in minutes.
Yeah.
It's just, we can't hit the same scale that players are going to do.
Nope.
And we can predict player behavior, but we're never going to be right. Players are going to do weird things all the time. They're going to end up in certain edge cases that we just can't predict. So that's why it's super important that we have all the systems to gather information about what's going on in production. So we can see, one of the things that we track a lot is we call it MTBF, mean time between failure, which is if the game is crashing. So we have certain targets about what the stability of the game should be, which when we release a patch, we get that information back hourly and say, okay, like, how's the game? Is it healthy? Do we need to do any emergency updates? I mean, last week after season 5 went live, players wouldn't have seen this, but we released, I think within 24 hours of that season starting, a new game server. Because we had a couple crashes that were a little more frequent than we'd like, and we had an easy way of fixing those. So we quickly put together a build and threw it out in production. We put that build up in one region, made sure that everything looked fine, and then we scaled it out to the rest of the world. So that's stuff that goes on all the time behind the scenes.
There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. And like, we don't talk about all those types of updates to players because it's seamless. Like, if there's a new game server from one day to the next, if they're compatible with the game client, which they were, there's no reason for anyone to see.
I mean, that's the goal, right? Everything,
of course,
should be not noticeable to players. The experience should improve always, but preferably not by interrupting your gameplay.
I think that's actually an interesting topic, because previously for different titles, whenever we had to do an update, there was usually maintenance. I think for Battlefield 2042, we've released most of our updates without needing to have downtime, which
I think we had our first scheduled maintenance a couple of weeks ago where we had to take the game down since launch.
And that was we had to. There was just some updates that just had to happen on some host machines. I think it was almost like operating system type stuff.
Yeah,
that had to be
exactly.
changed.
Yeah.
You can't get around some things.
but that is really cool. You know, for us nerds internally, like this is our job, or at least for the three of you, you're releasing builds, updates, keeping the game stable, making it running for players. But it is not having any downtime for such a long period of time while continuously pushing out updates, because I believe we push out every 2 weeks an update, and that's like a player-facing one, not even counting the backend ones. That's pretty great for a live service game. So can you speak more about how that works and the improvements we've made as well versus like previous Battlefield titles?
Yeah, I mean, how we design the game in the backends, it differs between what games we do, and it's something we've learned throughout all of these Battlefields we've created. Take Battlefield 1 for example. Whenever we patched that game, we'd have to bring it down. We'd have to make all the players go offline for an hour and update some database or something that required that no players were connected to the game while doing it. And that obviously is not the ideal scenario. You don't want any downtime.
Yep.
And then moving on to future Battlefields, we saw that as an issue and found ways of designing the game from the ground up where this would not be required, essentially resulting in a better play experience because like none of this downtime is required. And it is something that needs to be planned from the core of the game when you develop it. And you need to think about these things in early stages of development, that like, how are we actually going to deliver, or how is the players going to get these updates? And it's, we've learned from the past and we're improving for the future all the time. And it's come to a stage now where we're able to do these things, new technology, new ways of doing it, the cloud, like all of these different technical things that I'm not so inclined in, but Kevin is the right guy to talk about these things. But I mean, all of these things we design to make it as good of an experience as possible, and to eliminate these downtimes wherever we can. And I think Battlefield 2042 is a great example of how we've improved our release process when we patch.
I think just an important item to touch on is, for example, whenever we release an update, it's like, oh, okay, we'll do a tweet like, hey, this update at this time. But whenever there's downtime, like we take that very seriously as a team, even if it's like 30 minutes or an hour, it's like 30 minutes of your time as a player where you cannot play. It's like your free time you want to play. So even though it seems simple in terms of like, hey, maintenance didn't, then here's a tweet explaining that, we take that very seriously as a team. And we monitor a lot to make sure players can keep playing as much as possible without downtime.
Yeah, of course. And there's like, there could be updates coming to the game, like not a patch per se, but there's some team within EA that wants to make an update to the game, and they come to us and say, hey, we need to do this update, and that will require downtime, they say. And we'll usually work with them to try to find a way, where possible, to eliminate that downtime.
Downtime, you say?
Yeah, exactly. I'm the protector of the production
It takes a
environment.
lot these days for us to take the game down, especially Battlefield 2042. It's we don't do it lightly. We have so much flexibility now within our live service tooling, like as Kevin mentioned, being able to deploy our server updates like gracefully so there's no player impact. We've really, I mean, these are all of the seeds that were built up from like Battlefield 5. They had a vision there, and then all of these core ideas during the development of this game, and now we're seeing the fruit of our labor on all of those fronts.
And an item we've mentioned a few times is the different forms of updates we have. So backend, player facing. I don't know the correct terms you would call them, but can you explain the difference between like a player facing update, like, hey, I download the season 5, or for example, a server update, a hotfix, like?
Sure. So even within our client patches, the more player facing ones, we've got there's a content patch like season 5, or 5.1, which is coming at some point in the future. But those are the ones that we go through that longer branching process I was talking about before. We have our quality of life patches, which come in between those. I mean, going back to what you're saying of, every 2 weeks we're trying to patch the game for our players. Those quality of life updates, they are, we put them together a little differently.
Which I would love to talk a little bit more about.
We'll get to that one later.
Yeah.
So those are the player facing ones. Then we have, through our configuration tool that Sean was talking about, it's called Arrival. That's where we do a bunch of our updates. We do that, daily sometimes.
Yeah, we have complete flexibility on when we want to do those. Pom might say otherwise if I want to push something on a Friday, for example. But just to give some examples, we pushed live fixes to increase the ticket count in the new Season 5 map. We adjusted the balance of the vehicles in Breakthrough yesterday for that map. We basically we're constantly looking at player feedback when we launch a new season as well. Like, is there any balance adjustments we can do? Have we inadvertently shipped something that we didn't want to, for example, which unfortunately does happen from time to time. The tooling that we have gives us so much flexibility. I feel like I'm just saying flexibility all the damn time, but that's the truth of it. We do have a lot of, I guess we'll talk about this a bit later as well, what we call tweakables and mutators. Yes. And our ability to essentially change how the game works on a button press. It's pretty amazing. And
then from there we've got there's backend updates can be split up into a couple different things. So we have our microservices, so all the different services that run Battlefield, whether it's something for managing your inventory or for commerce or matchmaking, and then we've also got the actual game server itself, which we were talking about earlier, just our ability to update that fairly on the fly as well.
So as we just mentioned, I think we release a patch every 2 weeks. Which is a good cadence. We're looking at the amount of work that's involved in creating a patch, which we discussed earlier. Like, it's not that easy to just whip up an update and release it, even though depending on the type of update, we can do that very fast. So in a live server environment, there is always room to be more reactive to player feedback, which Sean just touched upon as well. So let's take a look at those quality of life updates that we do now, because I think those came to exist because of player feedback, and we wanted to be more reactive to, we released our season, then you have the 0.1 patch, the 0.2, but that was a month in between, and we noticed okay, if we have changes we want to make, we don't want to make players wait a full month.
Yeah, so it was always our goal on this project to do updates every 2 weeks. And it's tricky because, Season 5 went live last Tuesday. It takes us a bit to gather the feedback on things that we want to fix when it comes to stuff like balance, weapon damage, vehicle spawning, other things like that. Plus, we know there were a couple of bugs that we saw in Season 5 that we wanted to fix, but it was just too late. Like, we were at the point where we have to send the patch to to our certification partners and verification to get it live. There's just that point where it's it's too late. So we put together those handful of changes. It's usually about somewhere between 15, 20, 25 changes for these quality of life updates. But we don't go through that branching I was talking about. We just say we take the Season 5 build and we pile these 20, 25 changes on top of them. We cherry pick them from wherever they exist within our development lines, and we put that build together, and we do less testing, I guess, than we normally would, because there's just less time. It's also why we take less changes. It's about, again, going back to protecting that player experience, saying, can we take 20 meaningful, impactful changes in areas that are more condensed so we can narrow and focus our testing and release that with certainty.
I mean, it's the same process, really. It's just sped up a bit. Like it's similar, at least.
I mean, if you have
Definitely,
I guess to explain, the bigger the update / patch, the more risk you have of unforeseen bugs. So when we do these quality of life updates, we can do less testing because they're much smaller. We have the season 5 build already in this case, which we can see in live. We see how it works. So we just look at the feedback we're seeing, the top bugs that stand out, and we put that together in a small quality of life update to make that ready for players. And I think I do want to call out or give a shout out to the community, like our players. This is also the area where we read Reddit, Twitter, like Discord. And once you've had season 5 in your hands, like, oh, this weapon doesn't feel right, we tweak it. That's why this update exists as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's just they're a little tight. The timing is a bit tough because the season when the season comes out on Tuesday, it's the next Tuesday after that we need to have that build ready. And that feedback usually starts to really come in over the weekend. The team comes in. I guess yesterday we sat down with Tom, the rest of the community team, and some of our producers and said, like, hey, what more do we think we can do that we can safely turn around in 24 hours, fix, test, verify, and put in a build. So it's the timing's tight, but it's I think it's the best thing we can do for our players.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like overall, we have to. So a lot of time we do these quality of life patches. We'll look at Reddit as well after we've done the fact, and usually the top comment is, "Oh, why haven't you fixed this specific bug yet?" I think that's probably important to touch upon as well from like a community perspective. I mean, Kevin, you can probably talk a bit more about this as well, but generally, depending on the type of bug that we get, like it might be way more complex to diagnose, to fix. Maybe the complexity of the fix means that we find it too risky to include in a quality of life patch. But generally, if we're not like trying to ignore players' feedback in this case. Like if you talk about something, so I guess spoiler alert, in this next quality of life patch, we will be hopefully fixing the issue where if you're in a conquest capture zone, it doesn't show the capture UI for the flag. We've been, like, for me personally, I've been reading this for like the last 2 patches, but that was a particularly tricky bug to diagnose and actually fix, right? Yep. So once that fix comes in, like we will be looking at every available fix that we can take that's already been made, along with the community feedback, to try and build up a patch which is comprehensive enough for the players.
Yeah, and a fix like that's part of the world icon system is going to be something that's could be foundational to a lot of other systems. So if that's something that say players found after right around when season 5 went live, I can't remember when that
was. 4.2, I
was
think.
Was it 4.2 that introduced that? So if 4.2 is what introduced that, that was what 4.2 went live 6 weeks?
About a month ago, right?
Yeah, 6 weeks before. So that means that the team had before 5.0 was going through its like final verification stuff, they probably had 2 to 3 weeks to find a fix for that. And finding a fix that they feel comfortable about, that QV can verify, that doesn't rewrite a bunch of systems, that can have knock-on effects across the game, it takes time. I'm sure that we probably could have found a way to fix that bug really quickly, and it would have broke half the rest of the icons. It's about being as safe as we can to protect that player experience.
So not all bugs are easy fixes.
No, of course not.
Like even though like from a player perspective, like, okay, this bug is just a simple UI thing with a flag. There's a lot of dependencies again in the back end that we need to review, test.
I mean, it's not opening the editor and hitting the enable UI on capture points button. It's a little more
Why
complicated.
not, Kevin? Why not?
I wish it were that way.
Okay. And another thing we touched on earlier is it mutators, tweakables? I don't know how you want to refer to them.
I guess they're one and the same, right? If it's
kind of. Well, I guess one of them, I think it's mutators. Those are ones that are exposed to players through Portal. But tweakables are a larger. I guess mutators are a subset of tweakables.
Right.
We have more things that we can tweak that players can't.
Essentially, we have a cooler version of Portal.
Yeah, I mean that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
For the entire game. Yes.
Yeah.
So we can, in a live environment, make a lot of changes to how the game operates. So that could be,
God, so
Sean, just take us through.
Oh man, so we can essentially kill switch any item in the game, anything we want. Let's backtrack a little bit. So when we decide we want to create a new feature or add new content into the game, part of that package will be to include tweakables, as so we can safely enable or disable or edit that stuff without us having to do a client or server patch, which gives us the flexibility. I'm going to say it again for our live service. So, for example, like a voice over IP, for example, we have the configurability to enable or disable that on the fly. We have an entire suite of game settings, which covers levels, AI, like the battle pass, you name it. If it's a system in the game, we probably have a tweakable setting somewhere to either enable, disable it, or adjust it in one way or another to cover any issues we may foresee or to do balance adjustments. I mean, that's not even going into the stuff that we can do within the game, like levels itself. So we can adjust, as we've already done, like ticket counts, the AI, how their spawn rates, for example, like the vehicle spawns, like just a huge amount of adjustability.
Yeah, ticket count for which you touched upon earlier. And again, we do this to ensure like players can just keep playing the game. It's not easy, but we technically press a button and we change how something works in the game, so we can ensure that the player experience.
Yeah, it's like a twofold part, right? So obviously, like a lot of these buttons we'll use as a reactive measure depending on like feedback we're getting, but a lot of these will also just ensure that we are able to deploy our live service efficiently during a new season, for example. We have a lot of like kill switches and game settings that we need to adjust when a season ends going into a new season, for example. So you may have noticed in this season, for example, if you were still on the old patch, the game menus, for example, they all would have grayed out, so you wouldn't have been able to select a game. That was kind of our nudge, even though we have our live site notice there telling you that the new game update is available. That would have been our little nudge to say, hey, there's a new update, please go and grab it.
Yeah.
So we can
restart your game.
Exactly. Yeah. So we can configure that also like on the client version that you're running as well. So the older clients would see one version of the game menus, whereas the new client would see what we wanted you to see, which would have been the new like game menus and mixes, which would have included obviously the new map and everything that the experience team wanted to put out.
And one other item, we cannot tweak everything in the live environment, which we are working towards always improving. But for example, weapons are an example where we still need to release client updates to make some changes. But this is something we would like to improve in the future as well, to make sure we can be even more reactive to player feedback. Like, hey, this weapon is performing too well versus other weapons. We can now change this in our backend in the live environment without players having to grab an update or wait for that update. That's our end goal, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like obviously one of the things we can do right now is adjust. It's like character gadgets, like blast radiuses, things like that. We've done live adjustments to those in previous seasons.
The SPH, I think.
The grenade launcher blast radius.
30% reduction that we did. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, those are all live tweakables that we can adjust and push out on a button press, essentially.
So we already talked about it, but the most recent patch we released is Season 5, like the new season, New Dawn. As an example, how does that makes its way into players' hands, and how does the release day look for us as a team? I would love to give a closer look behind the scenes, because I already spoiled it on the live stream last Friday. There are burgers and fries involved. There's a war room.
It's the best part.
We all get together on site. We have multiple screens. We have a Zoom meeting going. We are playing the game as it goes live. we're all, sitting there on our laptops, like monitoring everything. It's a very cool experience to just get together like that as a team, but also it's a big moment because you release a new season. A lot of players are looking forward to this. How does the day look? How do we ensure everything keeps working? What are some of the issues we face? Because we did see some issues with this season. So talk us through it.
More meetings, I guess.
Well, essentially, the day is a meeting.
It is, but I mean, Sean was talking a little bit about how we understand, like, minute by minute, what happens through that day. So we have this massive cutover document that we've created that says, 8 a.m. UTC, this happens. 9 a.m. UTC, this happens. So that we can, at every point in time, understand what is happening and what's the expected player experience. So, and sometimes that might even mean, hey, for these 5 minutes here, if a player boots the game, gets this update, and sees this configuration, maybe they see a bit of a weird state. There's some limitations through that, but we make sure that we understand exactly what players are going to see throughout the day. So we'll sit down. Okay, so patch goes live. We'll check what does that mean. We'll start working with our live TV partners to go through and do those checks. And then throughout the day, every hour, go through additional things. And then lunch, of course, burgers.
Release burgers.
It's been a tradition here since at least Battlefield 5 that we have release day burgers.
Battlefield 1, yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah. It's good. We should make sure that keeps going forward.
I think the key part is that obviously we have a war room, right? So we're all in, whether virtually or in the office. So we're all centrally organized in a way that we can all communicate very efficiently and quickly. So if we do have any issues arise, or hopefully no issues, everyone is a shout away.
Yep. Yeah, it's been nice to have to do those in person again. I mean, back when the game launched, we were still under restrictions, so we did the war room for that was virtual. So we had a lot of people that were doing that from home on Zoom. But now getting back to doing it in the office is great when, there's that camaraderie, the whole team coming together. And then when there are issues, which there were a couple this time, there always are, but it's about the scale of them. Then everyone's there to quickly pull in the right people, get people in the room who can speak to the problems. You put on your incident management hat and you get to work on figuring out what the problem is and how to fix it.
Let's take the stats issue as an example. I think that's the one that was visible for players. So how do we identify something like that, and how do we get it solved?
So that one took a bit to identify as well.
And so to clarify before we go into it, the player profile stats were not tracking for a subset of players. Basically, like your KD ratio was off ever since Season 5 launched. So that was an issue we found after the season went live,
you could get put into a bad state essentially, which would reset.
It was the server actually that would get into that state.
Yes.
Some of our servers over time, they play, our servers they play hundreds and hundreds of rounds a day. Because when you're done playing on that server, it goes back into our pool, and the next group that match makes, they'll match make onto that server, and this happens over and over and over again throughout the day. Some servers, after about, 24 hours, they started to get into this, potentially in this bad state, where some players could then have this issue written with their stats. So I guess when the season came out Wednesday, it was about Thursday morning, we started to hear some reports about this issue. We spent the day debugging it.
From players as well.
Yeah, from players.
Yeah.
Players were, and it helped that we actually had some of our developers that had the issue as well. That way, so when we have very specific information about it's this account at this time, we were able to start getting a little bit more information about it. Worked with our live TV team. They kept hammering, trying to see if they could reproduce as well. Eventually they did. And then because you have very specific timing and it's happened that day, we can go and get the logs from the dedicated servers as well still. And that kind of culminated in later on Thursday saying, we've got an issue.
And it was a serious issue.
Yeah, because at first people were thinking, oh, well, it's just visual. Like having something like this in the stats database, it's pretty uncommon, which it is. So it's easy for people to assume that it was visual. It wasn't. So we made the decision then sometime Thursday evening, okay, we need to just disable all rights to the stats database because who knows what's happening now. We need to, you're minimizing the damage at that point. And then the team came in Friday morning, worked on a fix. We found one. We released another server update, which players didn't see. So I guess that was the second server hotfix we released that week. And then we made the decision that we needed to roll back stats. That there would be, while it would be impactful for everyone, it's better for our players to fix it for those that were broken, for those that did have the issue.
Not a decision we take lightly.
No,
we review this as an entire team from multiple angles. Like, what is the best player experience to, like, what is the most fair way we can resolve this? And ultimately, like, the issue started around or just after the season 5 launch. It's just making sure everybody could just continue off with their stats from an equal footing. It seemed like the best approach there.
So we decided there was a backup from the night before the season went live, and we worked with our partners to restore that backup and put it live. But it was a fairly long Friday with people updating various databases, and I believe by the time we got that all out was Saturday morning.
Past
midnight. Past midnight. Yeah.
But that's Sean is sitting there trying to do updates in our in Arrival, our configuration management with not the normal time we want to do that, but of course we've built systems that we're comfortable in doing that with.
Yeah, it was important. Obviously, once we got the stats issue rectified and all communicated, that we also gave compensation for.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a severe issue for players. While it might not have impacted everyone a ton, depending on who you are, it's we want to kind of make good for an FPS game. This is probably one of the worst ones that can happen. So we did not take this one lightly. Like, there was a lot of people working on this for a solid 48 hours to fix it and figure out a plan.
Yeah, so that becomes this whole issue became, it's almost like a super quick 24-hour turnaround of like a patch. There needs to be a plan put in place. We need to understand what decision have we made, what do we want to do, how do we execute on that, and how do we ensure that everyone involved in this, which is many teams. Again, I mean, it's the studio, it's the people working with the databases and the stats, it's the community team, it's the Tolman team. Everyone needs to be aligned on what our plan is and what we're planning to do, so that when we do this, which is, it's always scary to touch people's stats, we do it in a planned manner, and that we're all, again, aligned to what we're actually doing, communicating properly, ensuring that we do this in the best possible way we can. So it's one of those incident management scenarios, 24-hour turnaround, quick, get together, put the plan together, teamwork, and get it out to players as quickly as we can.
Yeah, they're, in a way that it's from the project management, from the developer standpoint, that it's kind of fun when those happen. Like you there's this part of your brain that switches on. You go into like, I got to fix this problem. Everything is about this. What's the structure that we have to set up? What's the process? Because there is no, we have run books for things. So we know if A happens, you do B and the outcome is C. We have a lot of that for, when we go through a launch, when we go through patches, there's no run book for this. It's like, you don't plan for something like this. So you're thinking on the fly of what to do. Things like this are a lot more difficult to get alignment on as well, because we've got, the teams we need to work with here, I think a lot of them are in India, a lot of them are in Austin or Vancouver. So it's a fairly global team that has to tackle these sorts of things. But it really shows the commitment that the team here at DICE and all of those that are around us to coming together, fixing this stuff really quick.
Yeah, for sure. It is a hectic but really fun environment to be in one way. Like it's always fun to solve problems for people. It's nice to be part of that experience and ensuring that we if we have a problem, we're gonna get it out and we're gonna solve it as good as we possibly can.
Hopefully no late Friday nights moving forward though.
No. I mean, Friday nights is never fun, but you know.
But ultimately, like, it is to ensure that you as a player can just keep playing the game and having fun. And meanwhile, we have a Sean and a Kevin and then Erik in the background working on making sure everything keeps running smoothly.
Ensuring that people can update their KD during the weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah, apologies in advance for everyone who suddenly had a crazy KD that we then reset because
I think the developer I mentioned that had it internally, I think his KD ratio was like 160 after he had that issue. He was a little sad when we fixed it. But.
I think this was a nice comprehensive overview of, you know, some of the work our teams do on the back end to keep the game running. So there's more to game design than just building, you know, creating the game itself in terms of like, hey, this character, this weapon. It takes a lot of work from multiple different teams. So we hope you had fun listening to that discussion, getting a little bit more insight about how that works. However, before we end, we have cookies. And I also want to ask Kevin, Sean, and Erik, like, is there anything else you just still want to mention from your perspective?
absolute silence.
Making games is hard.
Yeah,
It's not easy.
No, it is obviously hard. And I think, as Kevin already mentioned as well, like we don't try and have these issues on purpose, but it's, I think you have to be a special breed of developer to go in and be like, I want to be the person that works on the, you know, the war room live environment aspect. And I think it's like, as Paul mentioned as well, there's a lot of camaraderie there. And I think it's always super fun working with everyone when we do these releases. And obviously we plan and hope that everything does go well. But when it doesn't, we're all a very well-knit team when it comes to hopefully fixing those issues as quickly as possible.
Yeah, there's people that gravitate towards live service. I mean, I've found I'm one of them because it's a new challenge, it's a new problem all the time. I can't predict what I'm going to do.
The next problem is never going to be the same as the last
exactly.
one, you know?
I mean, there's been so many problems we've solved in the last year and a half since this game has been live. It's never the same, which is fun. It's terrifying, but it's also fun and challenging.
And very fast moving because it's the live thing.
Well, and I mean, because it's live
every Tuesday, right? We have our reset essentially. So every Tuesday, 12 UTCs, something's going to change in the game.
Players might not see a patch every week, but we look at it as the game updates every week, whether or not you're downloading a patch or not.
With the new rotations.
Yeah, with the new rotations. There's arrival updates that go with that. There's weekly missions. There's some of that is we're updating things, some of it is we're not. But we kicked off this journey, I guess would have been June 7th last year with season 1. And when you start that journey, you know that there's another season coming, and there's times that those are happening. So when we run into these problems, it's not like, well, we'll just delay the next one. It's like you kind of can't. It doesn't work that way. So you have to find solutions quickly, and sometimes it's you might cut corners, you might have to take compromises to fix something, with the plan of fixing it properly later, because you don't want to create a problem that's going to be larger in the future. But yeah, I mean, it's just that train, once it left the station, you couldn't stop it. So,
and it's still running.
Oh yeah.
And I hope everybody's having fun.
It's still running.
It was a lot of fun for us to release Season 5 Kneel Down.
It's still running, and it's continuously improving.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really good when it goes smoothly. All the players are happy. Everyone's playing. The best war room day is a quiet war room day. It's
yeah. June hasn't been kind to us, like we were saying last week, because I mean, season 1 we had a few issues, which was
was that in June?
It was the exact same week, actually. Same
the
day.
exact same week a year ago. Yeah. So now we're in season 5. Like, time flies.
Yeah, it is.
It's interesting.
But I think for me and a couple other folks, we remembered being up late Friday that same week last year doing stuff. I'm like, maybe this week is cursed. I don't know.
I think it is. Maybe we should next year not plan for a patch that
together last year for season 1. It was and here we are now talking about it on the podcast. Do you want some cookies?
Let's do it.
Of course.
Live unboxing of cookies. Okay. Grab one. It is they're called Petite Four.
trying to grab one without hitting the mic. Challenge impossible.
Yeah. So where did you find this?
So I was actually supposed to ping Nika because she is our cookie connoisseur and official supplier of cookies for the Inside Battlefield podcast.
She brings cookies to War Room sometimes.
Yeah, like I forgot to ping her to actually come and bring them in.
She usually brings baklava,
yeah.
which is great. I actually I ate them all, but if I was thinking ahead, I would have brought the cookies that my wife brought back last week because I had a couple packs of Jammy Dodgers.
Oh.
Which are always
for the next one.
Yeah. Next time she's in Gibraltar.
How do we feel about these cookies?
Good.
I'm unsure.
You had a different one than what I had. That's
I assume there's 4 different kinds of cookies.
Yes.
You're gonna have 4 cookies now. I guess this is lunch, more or less.
This is breakfast for me, technically.
Yeah, that's true.
And lunch, breakfast, lunch, dinner. But yeah, Sean, Erik, Kevin, thank you for being here today. I thought it was another fun episode to record. I think this is the first time where we give a look behind the scenes about what some of our teams do. So folks, get in touch with us on socials through #InsideBattlefield or at podcast@battlefield.com. And from all of us here at our Battlefield studios, stay classy and PTFO. That's it for today. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.